In 2022, this all started in Temecula, California, which is one of those places that looks calm on the surface. Wide roads, quiet neighborhoods, grocery stores that close too early. The kind of town where people wave at each other at stop signs and act like nothing ugly ever happens behind the front doors. I didn't live there. I lived about 40 minutes out. But I was there constantly for a while, driving up after work, telling myself it was worth it, telling myself I was building something real. I remember the first time I sat alone in my car outside her place and just stared at the house. Not because I was nervous. Because something in me didn't feel right, and I couldn't explain why. At that point, I'd already been going there for months. I knew the street. I knew which neighbor's dog barked at nothing. I knew which porch light flickered. I knew where to park so I wouldn't block the driveway. I also knew, in a way I didn't want to admit, that I was getting used to entering someone else's life through a side door. That's the part people jump to. The obvious part. I get it. I'm not pretending I'm innocent. But the thing that actually breaks me when I replay it isn't the fact that she was married. It's that I built everything on a rule she gave me from day one. A truth she repeated so many times it started to feel like a fact of nature. They're done, she'd say. It's been over for a long time. And then she'd get more specific, like people do when they want you to stop asking questions. We haven't been intimate since early fall, she told me once, like she was swearing under oath. There's nothing there. I believed her because I wanted to. Because it made it easier to believe I wasn't wrecking a home. I wasn't sneaking around behind some guy's back while he thought everything was fine. I was stepping into an ending. A transition. An almost finished chapter. That's what she sold me. A clean break that just hadn't been signed yet. 2 days ago, she sat across from me at a small kitchen table, different house, different town, neutral ground because I couldn't go back there after what she said, and she told me, finally, that it was all a lie. Not a misunderstanding. Not, it happened once. Not, I didn't know how to tell you. She said it plain. They've been sleeping together, she said, and then she stared down at her hands like she could disappear into them. I actually laughed at first, like my brain refused to accept it. It came out sharp and ugly. What do you mean, they've been sleeping together? I asked. Like, recently? She nodded, still not looking at me. Like the whole time, she said. The whole time. That phrase did something to me. It didn't just hurt. It rearranged everything. Because when you're told something like that, you don't just think about sex. You think about every moment you thought you understood. Every reassurance. Every, I love you. Every night you drove home feeling chosen. I could feel my stomach turning, and I remember gripping the edge of the table like I needed something solid so I didn't slide off the planet. I asked her questions I didn't even want answers to. How long? I said. She gave this weak shake of her head, like the numbers were too heavy to say out loud. I did the math anyway. Not exact dates, but the span of it. Months. A long stretch of time where she was looking me in the face and telling me one reality while living another. There's no good way to describe what that feels like. It's like being in a room where you thought you knew where the walls were, and suddenly the lights come on and you realize you've been walking into the same corner over and over. I wasn't just the other person. I was the person she kept in the dark on purpose. And the worst part? I wasn't just some fling. I wasn't someone she met twice in a parking lot. We had a whole relationship. That's what made it so sick. I'd been in her home. I'd eaten at her table. I'd helped carry groceries inside. I'd sat on the couch while a cartoon played in the background and her kid climbed over my legs like I was normal. Her kid called me by my first name, like it was nothing. Like I was just another adult that belonged there. I'd slept in that house. In the bedroom. In the bed. I can still picture it now, which is almost funny, because it's just a bed. A normal bed. Neutral comforter. 2 nightstands. Nothing remarkable. But after that confession, all I could think was, I was in their bed. And I didn't even know it was still theirs. I keep remembering tiny details, the kind you don't think about until they get poisoned. A jacket hanging on the back of a chair. A toothbrush I assumed was old. The way she would sometimes flinch when her phone lit up, then relax when she saw it wasn't him. I had asked her once, early on, if he knew about me. She said, "He knows I have feelings for you. He knows there's something." She used the word crush, like she was in middle school. And I remember feeling uncomfortable with that at the time, but I let it slide because she followed it with, "It doesn't matter. We're done." I heard what I wanted to hear. Apparently, he thought he was still married to someone who was working on the marriage. And I thought I was building a future with someone who was leaving. So when she told me the truth, my first thought wasn't even anger. It was this cold, quiet realization that I didn't know who she was at all. She started crying almost immediately. She moved her chair closer like she could physically reach across what she'd done. "I didn't want to lose you," she said. "I love you." I was scared. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was stuck on the image of her coming to me after being with him, or going back to him after being with me, and acting like none of it mattered. I finally said, "So you've been with both of us this whole time?" She didn't deny it. She just whispered, "I know." Then she said, "I'll do anything. Anything. Just don't leave." And that's when the sickness turned into something darker. Because in that moment, with her begging and crying and saying the right words, I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was tangled up in someone's life in a way that had never been honest, and I had no idea what else I'd been walking through without seeing it. I sat there, staring at her, and all I could think was, if she could lie about this for months, what else don't I know? I didn't meet her in some dramatic way. It wasn't a movie moment. It was ordinary. A mutual connection introduced us at a small gathering, the kind of casual weeknight thing where people stand around with plastic cups and talk about work, weather, nothing important. She was easy to talk to. That was the first thing. Not flashy. Not loud. Just present. She asked questions. She listened. She laughed at the right places, but not in a forced way. It felt like she actually heard what I was saying. At the end of the night, she lingered near the doorway like she didn't want to go home yet. I didn't think much of it at the time. A few days later she sent me a message. Something simple. "It was nice meeting you." I responded. We kept talking. It didn't start with flirting, not really. It started with this slow emotional familiarity, like we'd known each other longer than we had. She told me early on that her life was complicated. That word again. Complicated. "I'm in the middle of a divorce," she said one evening when we were on the phone. "It's messy. But it's happening." I remember pausing, because I didn't want to step into something I didn't understand. "Oh," I said carefully. "Are you sure this is a good time to talk to someone new?" She let out this tired breath. "I haven't felt like myself in years," she said. "I'm not looking for a distraction. I don't want to feel invisible anymore." That hit something in me. She didn't present herself like a villain. She presented herself like someone surviving. She talked about loneliness the way people do when they've been carrying it quietly for a long time. She said the marriage had been dead emotionally, that they were basically roommates. "It's been over," she told me. "We're just stuck in the logistics." I asked about her husband once, cautiously. "He's not a bad person," she said. "It's not like that. It just stopped working. There's no love there." She made it sound sad, not scandalous. And then she said the thing that became the foundation for everything. "We haven't been together in that way since last year," she said. That part ended a long time ago. She didn't hesitate when she said it. It sounded rehearsed, honestly. Like a line she'd said to herself until she believed it. I took it as honesty. I took it as proof that whatever this was, it wasn't happening in the middle of an active marriage. That was important to me. I wasn't trying to be someone's secret. I wasn't trying to wreck something that was still alive. I told myself I was stepping into the space after the collapse, not causing the collapse. The first time we met alone, it was coffee. Middle of the day. Public. Safe. She showed up looking exhausted but relieved, like getting out of the house was oxygen. We sat outside. She wrapped her hands around her cup like she needed the warmth. "I feel guilty even being here," she admitted with a half smile. "Then why are you?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Because when I talk to you, I don't feel trapped." That was the first time she framed me as an escape. Not in a manipulative way, at least not then. More like someone confessing something they didn't mean to. From then on, we talked constantly. Morning messages. Late-night phone calls. It wasn't just attraction. It was emotional. She told me about her days, about the small disappointments, the quiet heaviness of going through motions in a house that didn't feel like home. Sometimes she'd say things like, "I forgot what it was like to be seen." I didn't realize how quickly that kind of statement pulls you in. It makes you feel responsible. It makes you feel like you're holding someone's life raft. I asked her again, more directly, if her husband knew. "He knows I'm checked out," she said. "He knows this is happening. He just doesn't know the details." That should have bothered me more than it did. But she always smoothed it over. "He doesn't want me," she'd say. "He hasn't wanted me in a long time." Then she'd add, softer, "I didn't think I could feel anything again until you." I wasn't immune to that. I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth. When someone looks at you like you're the first good thing they've felt in years, it's intoxicating. It makes you feel chosen. Our relationship shifted from emotional to physical faster than I expected. There wasn't some long build-up. It was just one night when we were sitting in my car after dinner, and the silence stretched, and she turned toward me like she'd already decided. "I'm not supposed to do this," she whispered. I said, "Then don't." But she didn't move away. She kissed me like someone starving. Afterward, she didn't pull back in regret. She rested her forehead against mine and said, "I've missed feeling alive." I told myself that meant something. I told myself it meant she was already gone from him. The lines blurred quickly after that. She started inviting me over when her husband wasn't home. At first, it was just for an hour. Then longer. She'd text things like, "Come by. I just want to breathe for a second." The house was quiet, carefully so. No pictures of them together in obvious places. No wedding album on display. It felt curated, like she'd already emotionally moved out. She'd talk about the future casually, like it was inevitable. "When this is done," she'd say, "we'll have our own place. Somewhere lighter. Or, someday you won't have to leave through the garage." She laughed when she said that, like it was a joke. I laughed too. It didn't feel like a joke later. One afternoon, I showed up and her child was there. She hadn't mentioned it. My first instinct was to turn around, but she met me at the door and said, "It's okay. He won't understand. You're just a friend." I froze. "A friend?" I repeated. She touched my arm gently. "For now. Just, be normal. Be normal." So I walked into a life I wasn't supposed to be in. Her child was small, energetic, completely unaware of anything complicated. He asked me if I wanted to see his toys. I remember sitting on the floor, holding a plastic dinosaur, thinking, what am I doing? But she watched us with this soft expression, like it made her happy. Later, when her child went to another room, she whispered, I can see you here. I can see us as a real family someday. That was the moment something shifted deeper. Because it wasn't just about us anymore. It became about what she was implying. A future. A home. A life after the paperwork was finished. And I believed her, because she spoke like someone already halfway out the door. I didn't understand yet that you can talk about escape while still choosing to stay exactly where you are. At the time, all I saw was a woman reaching for something better. And I wanted to be the person she reached for. I just didn't realize how much of that story was being written around me, instead of with me. Once the physical line was crossed, it didn't feel like something you could uncross. It wasn't like we had a moment and then went back to being distant. It was the opposite. Everything accelerated. The texting turned into constant communication. The quiet emotional connection turned into something that felt fused. Like we were living parallel lives, one real and one hidden, and the hidden one started to feel more honest than anything else. That sounds ridiculous now, but at the time, it made sense in my head. She would message me first thing in the morning. Are you awake? Or, I miss you already. Sometimes she'd send something simple like, today feels heavy. And I'd know exactly what she meant. Heavy meant she was in the house. Heavy meant she was playing a role. I started becoming the person she escaped to, not just physically, but emotionally. She'd tell me things she claimed she couldn't tell anyone else. He doesn't see me, she said more than once. He doesn't even look at me anymore. I'd listen, and I'd feel anger on her behalf, which is dangerous, because anger makes you feel loyal. It makes you feel like you're defending something. I asked her again, maybe a week after we first slept together, if she felt guilty. She paused. Not about you, she said. Never about you. Then she added quickly, I feel guilty that I waited so long to let myself feel anything. That kind of answer is hard to argue with. It's designed to shut down the part of you that still has doubts. So I stopped asking. Or at least I stopped asking the questions that mattered. Instead, I started showing up. At first, it was careful. She'd tell me when he was at work, or when he'd taken a trip, or when she had space. I'd pull up and park a little down the street, like a teenager. She'd open the garage just enough for me to slip inside. The first time I stepped into the house, I remember how normal it was. It wasn't a dramatic setting. It wasn't some cold mansion. It was just a family home. Shoes by the door. A backpack on the floor. A bowl of fruit on the counter. The kind of place where people lived without thinking about how fragile their lives were. She acted relaxed, though. Like this was already hers alone. She took my hand and pulled me in. This is temporary, she said softly, almost like she was reminding herself. Soon it won't be like this. Soon. That word became a thread that held everything together. Soon we won't have to hide. Soon it will be official. Soon you won't feel like a guest in someone else's life. I didn't realize how much I was building on a timeline that didn't exist. We spent afternoons together in that house, trying to make the secrecy feel normal. We'd sit on the couch, talk in low voices, laugh about small things. Sometimes she'd rest her head on my shoulder, and the quiet felt intimate in a way sex didn't. That was when I started trusting her the most. Not in the heat of desire, but in the calm. Because calm makes you believe it's real. She started leaving little pieces of herself with me. A sweater in my car. A toothbrush at my place. Small things that felt symbolic, like she was slowly moving out of one life and into another. I ate it up. I won't pretend I didn't. It felt like progress. There were nights when she couldn't come over, and she'd call me instead. She'd whisper so no one could hear. "I hate this," she'd say. "I hate pretending." And I'd ask, "Then why are you still there?" Silence. Then something vague. "Because it's not simple. Because of my child. Because of money. Because of timing. Always timing." The excuses were soft, believable, human. And the more she gave them, the more I adjusted myself around them. That's how trust becomes intimacy. Not through grand declarations. Through small accommodations. Through accepting explanations instead of pushing. Through learning to live inside someone else's unfinished story. Eventually, she invited me over even when her child was there more often. That was another line. I remember the first time I hesitated at the door. "I don't know if this is okay," I said. She looked at me like I was sweet for worrying. "You're not a stranger," she said. "You're part of my life." Part of her life. She said it so naturally that it felt true. Her child treated me like an adult who belonged around. Not a father figure. Not anything defined. Just present. We'd sit at the table while he ate. I'd help reach things on high shelves. I'd listen to stories that didn't matter. There's a specific kind of intimacy that comes from being around a child. It makes things feel real in a way nothing else does. It made me feel like this wasn't just an affair. It made me feel like I was witnessing the early stages of something permanent. She would watch me with this expression I couldn't read fully, like affection mixed with something else. One evening, after her child went to bed, she leaned against the kitchen counter and said, "I can see you here. Every day." I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her. "In this house?" I asked. She nodded. "Not like this," she said quickly. "Not secretly. I mean, after. When it's done." I wanted to believe her so badly that I didn't ask what "done" meant anymore. I filled in the blanks myself. Divorce papers. Separate lives. Freedom. She talked about moving in together like it was already planned. "We'd need more space," she said once. "Somewhere with light. And a backyard." She said it casually, like she was talking about paint colors. I remember thinking, she wouldn't say this if she didn't mean it. That was the mistake. I started spending nights there sometimes. Not often, not at first. Only when she said it was safe. "He's gone," she'd whisper over the phone. "Just tonight. Come." I'd drive up feeling both excited and uneasy. She'd meet me at the door, kiss me, pull me inside like I was coming home. The first time I slept in the bedroom, I paused. Something in me registered the weight of it. I started. She cut me off. "It's just a room," she said softly. "It doesn't belong to him anymore. It doesn't belong to him anymore." That sentence should have made me run. But instead, I climbed into bed beside her. The sheets smelled like laundry detergent. Nothing strange. Nothing dramatic. Just normal. That's what made it worse, in hindsight. We weren't acting like two people doing something reckless. We were acting like a couple. We'd lie there afterward, breathing in the quiet, and she'd trace her fingers along my arm. "I've never felt safer," she said once. Safe. That word is dangerous when someone is lying. Because it makes you feel like you're building something pure inside something dirty. The trust grew in those moments. The mundane moments. The grocery runs. The whispered phone calls. The way she looked at me like I was her answer. I started to believe that even if the beginning was messy, the ending would be clean. That love could justify the confusion. That timing was the only thing holding us back. I didn't see how carefully she was managing two versions of herself. One for me. One for the life she still lived. And the more intimate we became, the more impossible it felt to imagine that she could be lying about the foundation. Because who does that? Who looks you in the eye, invites you into their home, lets you touch their life so completely, and still keeps the biggest truth sealed away? At the time, I thought intimacy meant honesty. I thought closeness meant trust. I didn't understand yet that you can be incredibly close to someone and still be standing inside a story they are controlling from the shadows. The strange thing is, the red flags didn't show up like warnings. They showed up like small interruptions. Little moments that didn't fit, but not enough to break the spell. At first, it was just her phone. She'd be talking freely, smiling, relaxed, and then the screen would light up and something in her face would tighten for half a second before she forced it back down. I noticed it. I didn't say anything. Sometimes she'd flip the phone over quickly, like a reflex, and then keep talking. I told myself it was stress. Divorce stress. Family stress. The kind of tension you'd expect from someone untangling their life. Once, we were sitting in my car after she'd come out for a bit, and her phone rang. She glanced at it and didn't answer. Just stared. "Everything okay?" I asked. She exhaled sharply. "Yeah," she said. "Just, him. He calls about stupid things." I waited. She didn't elaborate. Then she added, "I don't want him controlling my mood right now." It sounded reasonable. So I let it go. There were other little things. She would sometimes cancel plans at the last minute. Not often, but enough that it registered. Something came up, she'd text. Or, "I can't tonight. It's complicated." That word again. Complicated. I started to hate it, but I didn't know what else to call her life. When I'd ask what happened, she'd give half answers. "He's in a mood. My kid isn't feeling well. It's just not a good night." Always vague. Always something I couldn't argue with without sounding demanding. And I didn't want to be demanding. I wanted to be the calm in her chaos. I wanted to be the person who understood. There were moments when I realized how little I actually knew about the situation, and I'd try to ask directly. Like one night, we were sitting on the couch in her living room, the house quiet, and she seemed distracted. I said, "Have you guys actually started the divorce process? Like, paperwork?" She froze for a second. Then she smiled, soft and tired. "I can't do this right now," she said. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she whispered, "I just want to breathe when I'm with you. Can we not make everything about that?" It wasn't a refusal exactly. It was a pivot. And it worked. I nodded. "Okay," I said, even though a small part of me felt unsettled. Later, she kissed me like an apology. And the question disappeared. That became a pattern. Any time the conversation edged too close to reality, she would pull us back into emotion. Back into intimacy. Back into us. There were also physical details I ignored. Things you don't think twice about until you do. Like there always being fresh men's shoes by the door. She said they were old. Habit. Convenience. Like a jacket that stayed on a hook in the hallway no matter what. I once asked, lightly, "Does he still live here full-time?" She looked at me like I'd misunderstood something obvious. "Yes," she said. "For now." Where else would he go? The answer hit me wrong. "For now?" I repeated. She reached for my hand. "It's temporary," she said. "We're coexisting. That's all. Coexisting. Roommates. Logistics." She had a whole vocabulary built to soften what was still intact. Sometimes she'd talk about him in a way that didn't match someone who was completely checked out. Not affectionate, but present. She'd mention dinner, or a family outing, or an argument about money. Normal married things. And I'd sit there wondering how two people who were supposedly finished could still move through life so closely. When I'd look confused, she'd say, "It's just for the kid. We have to keep things stable." Stability became the shield for everything. One afternoon, her child ran into the room holding a drawing. "Look," he said, waving it proudly. It was a picture of 3 stick figures. 2 tall ones. 1 small. A family. My stomach tightened, because I wasn't in it. Of course I wasn't. But it was a reminder. This was still a family unit in his mind. Later, after he left, I said quietly, "Does he think you and your husband are still together?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "He's too young to understand all of it." That wasn't really an answer. I should have pressed. I didn't. The unease came in waves. Sometimes I'd drive home after being with her and feel strangely hollow, like I'd stepped out of a dream and into something colder. I'd tell myself it was just the strain of secrecy. That it would be over soon. Soon. There was always soon. Another red flag was how careful she was with information. She'd tell me details about her feelings, about her loneliness, about how much she loved me. But practical details? Those were foggy. If I asked about timelines, she'd shrug. If I asked what her husband thought about the divorce, she'd say, "He doesn't get it." If I asked if they'd talked about separating officially, she'd say, "We will." Always future tense. Always just out of reach. Once, I said, "Do you think he suspects something?" Her eyes flicked up sharply. "No," she said too fast. "He doesn't know anything." Then she softened. "He knows I have a crush. That's all." Crush. The word sounded absurd for what we were doing. I stared at her. "A crush?" I repeated. She laughed nervously. "It's just what I told him so he wouldn't ask more questions." That should have terrified me. Because if she could reduce what we were to a crush, she could reduce it to nothing at any moment. But she leaned in and said, "You're not nothing to me." And again, emotion smoothed over logic. There were moments she'd get almost possessive. Not openly, but subtly. If I mentioned going out with friends, she'd ask who. If I didn't respond right away, she'd double text. Sometimes she'd say things like, "Don't forget about me." It sounded sweet. It also sounded desperate. At the time, I interpreted it as fear of losing me. Now I wonder if it was fear of losing control. The biggest red flag was that I was always adapting. Always waiting. Always fitting into the shape she needed. I never had full access to her life. I never existed in daylight. I existed in the margins. And every time the unease rose up, she would meet it with softness. With reassurance. With some version of, "Just hold on." I told myself that love required patience. That complicated situations took time. That doubt was normal. But there was a difference between patience and ignoring the quiet voice inside you that keeps asking the same question. If everything is ending like she says, why does it still feel like it's so actively happening? The longer it went on, the harder it became to separate my trust from my denial. And I didn't realize yet that the unease wasn't paranoia. It was my mind trying, gently, to wake me up. Somewhere along the way, without either of us saying it out loud, my life started bending around hers. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was little choices. Turning down invitations because she might have a free evening. Keeping my phone close because she liked knowing she could reach me. Driving up even when I was tired because she'd text, "I just need you tonight." Need is a powerful word. Need makes you feel essential. And I think that's what happened. I started believing I wasn't just someone she wanted. I was someone she relied on. There were days she'd call me on her lunch break, voice low, like she was hiding in a bathroom or sitting in her car. "I can't do this much longer," she'd whisper. "Then don't," I'd say. "Leave. Make it real." A pause. "I'm trying," she'd reply. Always trying. Never doing. But then she'd say something like, "You're the only good part of my life right now." And my frustration would collapse into pity. Into attachment. Into responsibility. It's hard to walk away from someone who talks like they're drowning. We developed routines that felt like a relationship, not an affair. We had our places. A small restaurant off the highway where the staff started recognizing us. A quiet park where we could sit in the car and talk without worrying about someone overhearing. Even errands started to feel intimate. She'd call me while she was grocery shopping. "What should I cook tonight?" she'd ask, like I lived there. Sometimes she'd send pictures of things she liked. A lamp. A throw blanket. Little domestic fantasies. Once she texted, "When we have our own place, I want it to feel warm. Not like this house. Not like this house." She said it like the house was already a shell she was leaving behind. I pictured her stepping into something new, something honest, and I pictured myself waiting at the other side. That image became addictive. The future became the drug. And the longer we talked about it, the more real it felt. At some point, she started leaving things in my apartment. Not just a sweater. Actual presents. A spare set of toiletries in my bathroom. A book on my nightstand. One time, she came over with a small bag and said, half joking, "Should probably just keep some stuff here." I laughed, but my chest tightened in a good way. It felt like progress. Like she was inching out of one life and into mine. I wanted that so badly I didn't question how slow the inching was. The emotional intimacy deepened faster than anything physical. She would tell me things like, "I've never trusted anyone the way I trust you." Or, "You make me feel safe." Those words did something to me. Because trust, safety, those are sacred. You don't throw them around unless you mean them. I assumed. I projected. I believed. I told her things too. Things I hadn't even realized I was carrying. She became the person I talked to at night, the person I checked in with in the morning. I stopped feeling like I had a separate emotional world. She was the world. That's the point of no return. When you're no longer dating someone. You're orbiting them. There were moments that felt almost normal. One afternoon, I came over and her child was at the table coloring. He looked up and said my name like it was expected. "Hi," he said casually. "Hey," I replied, forcing steadiness. He went back to his drawing. She smiled at me from the kitchen like it warmed her. Later, she whispered, "He likes you." I didn't know what to do with that. Because it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about a kid who didn't understand any of this. A kid who thought adults just came and went without meaning. But meaning was building. Whether we admitted it or not. She started talking more openly about a shared life. Not just, "someday." More specific. "When this is done, I want us to find somewhere closer to your work. Or, we'd need an extra room. For him." Him. She said it gently, like she was testing the idea of blending lives. I remember staring at her, trying to process how far ahead her imagination was running. "You really think that's possible?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said. "I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't." That was the kind of sentence that seals you in. Because what else could you take it as except commitment? There was one night that stands out more than the others. She told me her husband was away. That it was safe. I drove up late. The neighborhood was dark and still, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're doing something forbidden even if you don't see anyone. She opened the door before I knocked, like she'd been watching for me. She pulled me in, kissed me hard, like relief. "I missed you," she murmured. "I saw you 2 days ago," I said, trying to smile. "It feels like weeks," she replied. We ended up in the bedroom. The same room that should have felt off limits, but by then, it didn't. It felt like hours. Afterward, we lay there in the dark, breathing slow. She rested her hand on my chest and said, "I hate that you have to leave." I stared up at the ceiling. "Then stop making me leave," I said quietly. She went still. "I will," she whispered. "I promise. I'm just scared." "Of what?" "Of blowing everything up." That was the first time she said it that way. Blowing everything up. Not ending. Not moving on. Blowing up. As if the marriage was still something intact enough to explode. It should have made me pause. Instead, I said, "It's already blown up. You're just standing in the rubble." She didn't respond. She just held me tighter. In the morning, I woke up before her. The house was silent. I lay there listening. And I remember a strange feeling creeping in. Not guilt. Not fear. Something closer to unreality. Like I was inside a life that wasn't mine, playing a role no one had cast properly. I got up carefully and walked to the kitchen for water. On the counter, there was a lunchbox. A child's lunchbox. On the fridge, a schedule with handwriting that wasn't hers. I stared at it too long. A list of appointments. Family things. Normal life. Still functioning. Still arranged. And it hit me, briefly, like cold air. This isn't over. Not really. I went back to bed before she woke up. When she opened her eyes, she smiled. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," I replied. She kissed my shoulder. "Someday," she murmured, half asleep, "we'll wake up like this and not have to be quiet. Someday. Again. Always someday." By then, leaving didn't feel like an option. Leaving felt like tearing away from something I'd already built my heart around. Even though the foundation was shaky. Even though I was constantly waiting for a future that never arrived. I didn't realize I had crossed into emotional dependency as much as she had. I thought I was choosing love. But looking back, I wonder if I was just choosing the version of reality she kept handing me. Because facing the truth would have meant admitting I was already too deep. I didn't see the confession coming. That's what still messes with me. If there had been a build-up, if there had been a fight, if she had been acting distant or strange in some obvious way, maybe my brain would have had time to brace. But it happened in the middle of normal. A normal week. A normal stretch of messages and plans and, "I miss you," and, "soon." Then one evening, she texted me, "Can we talk tonight?" Like, really talk. Something about the wording made my chest tighten. I asked if everything was okay. She didn't answer right away. When she finally did, all she said was, "I need to tell you something." I drove to meet her at a quiet place we'd used before when she didn't want to risk being seen. Not her house. Not mine. Neutral. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in her car with the engine off. The streetlights made everything look pale. I got in the passenger seat and immediately felt the difference in the air. She didn't reach for me. She didn't smile. She looked like someone waiting for surgery. "What's going on?" I asked. She kept staring straight ahead, hands clenched in her lap. "I can't do this anymore," she said softly. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? Do this anymore?" She shook her head quickly. "No, not us. Not that. I mean, I can't keep holding something in. I waited. Seconds stretched. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe her husband found out. Maybe she was backing out. Maybe she was finally leaving. Then she whispered, barely audible, "I haven't been honest with you." That sentence alone could have meant so many things. I tried to stay calm. About what? I asked. Her throat bobbed like she was swallowing something sharp. Then she said it. One sentence. They never stopped. I blinked. What? She finally turned toward me, eyes wet, face crumpling. Me and him, she said. We never stopped. I stared at her like she was speaking another language. Stopped what? And then she said the words clearly, like forcing them out. Sleeping together. For a second, I honestly thought I misheard. It didn't fit. It couldn't. I felt my brain refusing to connect the sound to meaning. No, I said automatically. No, that's not, you told me. I know, she cut in, voice breaking. I know what I told you. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. I leaned back against the seat, suddenly dizzy. How long? I asked. Her eyes dropped. The pause was everything. The whole time, she whispered. The whole time. I felt something inside me go quiet. Not calm. Just, dead silent. Because in that moment, every single memory rearranged itself. Every night. Every reassurance. Every time she said, "There's nothing there." Every time she said, "It ended last year." I stared at her, trying to find a crack in it. A few times? I asked, hating myself for even asking, like the number mattered. She shook her head, crying now. No, she whispered. It's been ongoing. Ongoing. Like a routine. Like a marriage. My mouth went dry. So you've been with him, I started. And with you, she finished, tears slipping down her cheeks. The air felt thick. I looked at her and couldn't recognize her. I couldn't reconcile the person who held my face in her hands and told me she loved me with someone who could do that. How? I said, voice rising despite myself. How did you do that? She made a small broken sound. I didn't want to lose you. I laughed. It came out sharp, ugly. You didn't want to lose me, I repeated. So you lied to my face for months? She reached for my arm. I jerked away like her touch burned. Don't, I said. She froze, hand hovering in the air. I was scared, she said desperately. I was trapped. I didn't know how to end it with him. I didn't know how to. But you told me it was ended, I snapped. I know. You looked at me and said there was nothing between you two. I know. You let me build an entire relationship around that. She sobbed quietly. I know, she whispered again, like it was the only word she had left. My chest ached in a way that felt physical. I pressed my palms into my eyes, trying to stop the images flooding in. Images I didn't want. Her with him. Her with me. Back and forth. Both of us believing different versions of her. I lowered my hands and stared at her. Does he know about me? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She shook her head. No. I stared harder. Nothing? He knows I told him I had feelings. A crush. That word again. Crush. I almost lost it. A crush, I said slowly. So he thinks you have a crush. Meanwhile you've been sleeping with him and sleeping with me. She nodded, shoulders shaking. Yes. My stomach turned violently. I opened the car door for air, leaned forward, breathing hard. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. It was realizing how naive I'd been. I had spent months telling myself I wasn't the kind of person who would step into a living marriage. I had spent months clinging to her timeline, her story, her version of events. And she'd known. She'd known the whole time. When I finally sat back, my voice was quieter. Why are you telling me now? She wiped at her face with trembling fingers. Because I couldn't keep doing it, she said. It was eating me alive. I stared at her. So your guilt finally got too heavy. It's not just guilt, she said quickly. I love you. The words landed wrong. Like a costume. Don't say that, I muttered. I do, she insisted. I swear. What we have is real. It's real to me. How? I asked, my voice breaking. How can it be real if you were lying the entire time? She leaned forward, pleading. Because I meant everything I said. I was weak. I was scared. I didn't know how to let go of the old life while holding the new one. Holding the new one. Like I was something she carried. Like I was an object. Not a person. I shook my head slowly. You didn't give me a choice, I said. I know. You decided for me, I continued, voice shaking. You decided I would stay as long as you kept me in the dark. She was sobbing openly now. I didn't want to lose you, she kept repeating, like a prayer. Lose me. I thought about all the times I'd been in her home. In her bed. Around her child. I thought about the way she'd talk about the future like it was inevitable. How many times, I said quietly, did you come to me after being with him? She froze. Her face twisted. I can't, she whispered. That silence was the answer. I felt sick. I leaned back, staring at the windshield, at nothing. So what now? I asked, hollow. She grabbed onto the desperation like it was a lifeline. Now I fix it, she said quickly. Now I stop. I'll do anything. I'll prove it. I'll choose you. Choose me. The word hit like a joke. You already chose, I said softly. Over and over. You chose to lie. She shook her head violently. No, I choose you now. Please. Don't leave. Her voice cracked on the last word. I looked at her, really looked. At the fear. At the panic. At the way she suddenly needed me more than ever now that the truth was out. And I realized something that scared me more than the confession itself. She wasn't just afraid of losing love. She was afraid of losing whatever I represented in her life. The escape. The fantasy. The backup. Maybe even something darker I hadn't named yet. I sat there, stunned, heartbroken, feeling like the ground had disappeared. And even as she begged, even as she cried, all I could think was, if she could lie this completely. What else was I standing inside without knowing? I found out the lie was bigger than sex in a way that didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. Like my mind couldn't take the full shape of it in a single moment, so it fed it to me slowly, one sick realization at a time. That first night after she told me, I didn't sleep. I went home and sat in the dark on my couch, staring at my phone, waiting for some part of me to wake up and say, this isn't real. This is a misunderstanding. But there was nothing. Just the echo of her voice. The whole time. She texted me constantly. Please. I'm sorry. I love you. Don't do this. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. Because what do you say when the person you trusted most reveals they've been living two lives right in front of you? The next day, she showed up at my place unannounced. I opened the door and she looked wrecked. Puffy eyes. Hair pulled back like she hadn't cared enough to fix it. I need to talk, she said immediately. I should have shut the door. Instead, I stepped aside. She walked in like she belonged there, like nothing had changed, like she hadn't just cracked my life open. She stood in the middle of my living room, hands clenched. I can't lose you, she said again. I stared at her. You already did, I replied. She shook her head violently. No. Not if you let me fix it. Fix it. I didn't even know what it was anymore. I sat down, exhausted, and said quietly, tell me the truth. All of it. Right now. No more partial answers. She hesitated. That hesitation was the first sign that the confession hadn't been the end. It was just the door. I told you, she whispered. No, I said, sharper. You told me one part. What else? She stared at the floor. Then she said something that made my skin go cold. He doesn't know how close we were. I blinked. What do you mean? I mean, she swallowed. He thinks it was emotional. Like I told you. A crush. I laughed bitterly. A crush doesn't spend the night, I said. She flinched. I know. So why would you tell him that? Her voice dropped. Because if he knew everything, it would destroy him. Destroy him. I stared. And you were worried about destroying him, I said slowly, while doing this? It wasn't like that, she said quickly. I was trying to keep things stable. Stable. That word again. That excuse again. But something about it sounded different now. Less like justification. More like strategy. I leaned forward. Stable for who? I asked. Her eyes flickered up. For my kid, she said immediately. Then, softer, for me. There it was. For me. She wasn't keeping things stable out of kindness. She was keeping things stable because the truth would cost her something. I felt my chest tighten. So you were never going to tell him? She opened her mouth, closed it. I don't know, she whispered. That was answer enough. And then the darker thought slipped in. If she could keep him in the dark. If she could keep me in the dark. How many people were standing in shadows because she needed them there? I sat back, staring at her. And for the first time, I stopped seeing her as a woman stuck between two choices. I started seeing her as someone managing something. Controlling it. She stepped closer, voice trembling. I chose you, she insisted. You have to believe that. But the words didn't land. Because I could still hear the other truth underneath. She chose herself first. I looked at her and asked, why now? Why confess now? She froze. The pause stretched too long. My stomach turned. Why? I repeated. She whispered, because I was scared you'd find out another way. That hit like ice. Another way? I said. Her face crumpled. I didn't want it to come out like that. Come out how? She didn't answer. Just stood there shaking. And suddenly my brain started reaching for things I hadn't wanted to consider. The way she always needed things controlled. The way she curated the house. The way she kept timelines vague. The way she spoke about the future like it was a script. I swallowed hard. What happened? I asked. Did something change? She shook her head quickly. No. Nothing changed. But her voice was too fast. Too thin. I stood up. Tell me, I said. Right now. She stared at me like a cornered animal. Then she finally said it. He asked me something. My throat went tight. Who? My husband. The word sounded heavier now. What did he ask? She hugged her arms around herself. He asked if there was someone else. Silence. The room felt like it shrank. I stared at her. And what did you say? I told him no, she whispered. Of course she did. I felt dizzy again. So he suspects. A little, she admitted. But not really. He doesn't know. Doesn't know. That phrase suddenly sounded less like reassurance and more like a countdown. I looked at her. And you're still sleeping with him, I said. Her eyes snapped up. No, she said quickly. Not since I told you. Not since. The words made my stomach churn. So it had been happening up until the moment before the confession. Up until guilt became inconvenient. I breathed out slowly. And you expect me to stay? I expect you to understand, she pleaded. I was trapped. Trapped. But trapped people don't usually keep secrets this clean. They don't usually build fantasies so carefully. She stepped closer, tears spilling again. I love you, she whispered. I was going to leave. I swear. I shook my head. You were going to leave, I repeated. Or you were going to keep both as long as you could? She flinched like I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Fair? My voice cracked. You let me into your home. Around your child. You let me believe I was part of something real. And all the while, you were still living the life you told me was over. Her sobs grew louder. I didn't know how to stop. But that was the thing. She knew how. She just didn't want to. Because stopping would mean consequences. Stopping would mean losing control of the narrative. I stared at her and felt something shift inside me. A colder awareness. This wasn't just about betrayal. This wasn't just about sex. It was about how easily she could split reality into compartments. How easily she could let people become characters in her story without their consent. And then, quietly, another thought surfaced. If her husband was starting to suspect. If he was asking questions. That meant this wasn't contained anymore. It wasn't just hidden shame. It was unstable. A structure cracking. And I realized, sitting there with her crying in my living room, that the most dangerous part wasn't what I knew. It was what might happen once everyone else started knowing too. Because the truth doesn't stay buried forever. And when it comes up, it rarely comes up gently. After that day, nothing felt stable. Not my thoughts. Not my body. Not even time. Everything moved in this haze where I was half awake, half numb, constantly replaying the same images I didn't want. Her in her house. Her in my arms. Her going back. Her lying. And through all of it, her voice in my phone, begging like the truth was something we could negotiate. She didn't give me space. Maybe she couldn't. Or maybe space was the one thing that would have allowed reality to settle, and she couldn't afford that. She texted constantly. I'm sorry. I'll fix it. I can't eat. Please don't do this. When I didn't answer, she called. Sometimes 3 times in a row. Her name flashing across my screen started to make me feel sick. Finally, one night, I picked up. What? I said, sharper than I meant. She was crying immediately. I can't breathe, she said. I feel like I'm losing you. I stared at the wall. You already lost me, I replied. No, she whispered. Not if you stay. Stay. Like staying was the cure. Like staying would rewind months of deliberate deception. I could hear her breathing hard, like she was panicking. I ended it, she said quickly. I swear. I told him I need space. I'm done. Done. I didn't believe the word anymore. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I need you to know I'm choosing you. Choosing. That word again. As if she was picking between outfits. As if what she'd done was a confused mistake instead of a sustained double life. I stayed quiet. She sobbed. Say something, she begged. Please. Don't punish me. Punish. The language twisted things. It made my pain sound like cruelty. Like I was withholding forgiveness out of spite instead of self-preservation. I finally said, "Lo, you lied to me for months. I know. You let me build my entire world around a story that wasn't true. I know. You still went home to him." Silence. Then, smaller, "I didn't want to lose you." There it was again. Always the same center. Not remorse for what she did to me. Fear of losing what I gave her. I hung up. The next morning, she showed up again. This time, she didn't knock gently. She knocked like she was desperate. When I opened the door, she stepped forward immediately, eyes wild. "Just listen," she said. I didn't move. "I did listen," I replied. 4 months. She looked like she might collapse. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to let me prove it." "Prove it how?" "By being honest now." Honesty after months of lies isn't proof. It's damage control. I let her inside only because I didn't want her making a scene outside my building. She paced my living room like a trapped animal. "I can't go back," she said suddenly. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I can't go back to him," she repeated. "Not after this. Not after you." The word sounded dramatic. But I noticed something underneath. Not, "I won't. I can't." Like she didn't have a choice anymore. I stared at her. "Are you saying he knows?" Her head snapped up. "No. No, he doesn't know." Then she added quickly, "Not everything. Not everything." That phrase made my stomach tighten. "So he knows something. He knows I've been distant," she said. "He knows I've been unhappy. He asked questions." I watched her carefully. "And what happens when he keeps asking?" She swallowed. "He won't," she said, too fast. I felt tired. Bone tired. "This isn't sustainable," I muttered. "I know," she whispered. "That's why we have to move forward." Move forward. Her solution was always forward. Never accountability. Never sitting in the wreckage. Just running into the next version of the story before the current one caught up. She stepped closer, voice trembling. "We can still have what we talked about," she said. "We can still be together. I'll leave. I'll do it. I swear." I looked at her. "What does leaving actually mean?" I asked quietly. She froze. "I don't know," she admitted. There it was. She had no plan. Just panic. Just need. Just words. I sat down, rubbing my temples. "You involved your child in this," I said. Her face crumpled. "Don't." "No," I continued, voice shaking. "Don't tell me not to. I was in your house. Around him. He thought I was just someone. And you let that happen." Tears poured down her face. "I didn't mean to." "But you did," I snapped. "You did mean to. Because you wanted both worlds. You wanted comfort at home and escape with me." "That's not fair," she whispered again. But it was fair. It was exactly what happened. And the more we talked, the clearer something became. I wasn't her partner. I was her pressure valve. I was the place she went when she couldn't stand her life, and the moment her life demanded something from her, she folded back into it. I thought about him. The husband. The invisible person in all of this. The man who still thought he was married to someone working things out. I thought about how he didn't know I existed in any real way. And I felt a strange nausea that wasn't just guilt. It was disgust. At her. At myself. At the entire structure. I asked, quietly, if I stay, what happens to him? She went still. He'll be fine, she said. Fine. Like he was a side character. Like his reality didn't matter. I stared at her. You don't even sound sure. Her voice sharpened suddenly, defensive. Why are you so focused on him? That caught me off guard. Because he's a person, I said. So are you, she snapped. So am I. Why is it always about what he deserves? What about what we deserve? We. She still said we. As if we were equals in this. As if my consent hadn't been stolen. As if I hadn't been dragged into this under false terms. The desperation in her voice started to feel different. Less like love. More like possession. Like she couldn't stand the idea of losing control of the one person who made her feel alive. And suddenly I saw it. If I left, she would still have him. She would still have the marriage. The house. The stability. The child's world intact. She would grieve, maybe, but she wouldn't fall apart. I was the only one who would walk away with nothing. No home. No legitimacy. No future. Just the role of the disposable one. The secret that could be erased. And I think she realized that too, because her tone shifted again, softening. Please, she whispered. Don't abandon me. Abandon. Another loaded word. I looked at her, tears streaking her face, and felt the weight of it. If I stayed, I would be agreeing to live inside her distortion. If I left, I would be the villain in her narrative. Either way, I would lose something. My peace. My dignity. My sense of self. I didn't answer her. I just stared, feeling the silence stretch between us like a cliff. And deep down, I couldn't stop thinking the same thing. When the truth finally breaks into daylight. I'm the only one who has no place to stand. I didn't tell her I was leaving. Not in some clean, decisive speech. I just started pulling back. It was instinct. Like my body knew before my mind did that staying near her was dangerous. I stopped answering right away. Then I stopped answering at all. I told myself I needed time, that silence would create space, that space would help me think. But silence doesn't stay empty. It fills. And in our case, it filled with panic. She kept reaching for me like a person grabbing at the edge of a cliff. Long texts. Short texts. Calls at odd hours. I can't do this without you. Please don't punish me. I'm losing everything. Everything. That word always sounded too big coming from her, because I couldn't stop thinking, are you really losing everything? Or just the part that was convenient? 3 days after I stopped responding completely, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't pick up. It rang again. And again. On the third try, something in me tightened, and I answered without thinking. Hello? Silence. Then a man's voice. Is this Daniel? My name sounded wrong in his mouth. Heavy. Foreign. I felt my stomach drop. Who is this? I asked, already knowing. A pause. This is Mark. Not his real name, but in that moment it didn't matter. Her husband. The man who was barely supposed to know anything. My throat went dry. I couldn't speak. He continued, voice tight, controlled in a way that made it more frightening. I'm not calling to fight, he said. I just need to understand what's going on. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. How did you get my number? I managed. Another pause. She gave it to me, he said. That hit like a slap. She gave it to him. My mind scrambled. Why would she do that? Unless she didn't give it willingly. Unless it had been found. Unless this wasn't controlled anymore. I swallowed hard. What did she tell you? I asked. He let out a breath that sounded like exhaustion. She told me you were a friend, he said. That you were someone she talked to. A bitter laugh rose in my chest, but I forced it down. A friend, I repeated quietly. That's what she said, he replied. But I'm not stupid. The silence between us felt endless. Then he asked, flatly, how long has this been going on? I stared at the wall in my apartment, feeling like the room was tilting. I could lie. That was the option she had taken over and over. I could protect her. Protect myself. But something inside me was done protecting. I don't know what she told you, I said carefully. She told me it was nothing physical, he replied. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Nothing physical. I closed my eyes. That was the version she wanted him to have. The one where she was still salvageable. The one where he could forgive her. The one where I was just a harmless crush. I felt sick. It wasn't nothing, I said quietly. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of realization. Full of something breaking. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. Were you sleeping with her? I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't want to. Because I could feel the weight of the answer crushing the air. Yes, I said finally. Just one word. He exhaled sharply, like he'd been punched. How long? I stared at the floor. Too long. Long enough to be unforgivable. Months, I said. A sound came from him then, something between a laugh and a sob. She told me, he started. Then stopped. I could hear him breathing hard. I asked her, he said. I asked her straight up if there was someone else. And she looked at me and said no. My chest tightened. Of course she did. He was quiet for a moment, then said, almost to himself, I knew. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I felt like I was floating outside my body. I'm sorry, I said, and the apology sounded useless. He didn't respond to it. He just asked, did you know she was still with me? There it was. The real question. The one that separated guilt from betrayal. I swallowed. She told me you weren't together, I admitted. She told me it was over. A bitter edge entered his voice. But you were in my house. The words landed like ice. Yes, I whispered. You met my kid. I flinched. Yes. Another long silence. Then, quietly, Jesus. I could hear something shifting in him. Not anger. Not shouting. Something colder. A collapse. I don't even know who she is, he said. The sentence was so similar to what I'd thought that it almost took my breath away. Neither of us knew who she was. Not really. He spoke again, voice tighter now. She's telling me you're obsessed with her, he said suddenly. My blood ran cold. What? She's telling me you wouldn't leave her alone, he continued. That you pressured her. That you took advantage of her emotional state. For a second, I couldn't speak. The audacity of it stunned me. She said that? I whispered. That you knew she was vulnerable, he said. That you were just using her. My hand started shaking. "No," I said sharply. "No. That's not what happened." I realized in that moment what she was doing. She was rewriting. She was saving herself. Turning me into something ugly so she could step back into the marriage with cleaner hands. I felt something hot rise in my throat. "She told me she loved me," I said, voice trembling. "She told me she was leaving. She—" "Stop," he said suddenly, voice cracking. "Just stop." He sounded like he couldn't take any more. I sat there, breathing hard, realizing the worst part wasn't even the call. It was what it confirmed. When the truth came out. It didn't come out clean. It came out twisted. Weaponized. And in her attempt to survive, she had already started sacrificing me. The call ended without closure. No screaming. No resolution. Just two men on opposite ends of the same lie, realizing too late that she had been holding the narrative the entire time. I sat there afterward, staring at my silent phone, and I understood something with sick clarity. This wasn't going to end with honesty. It was going to end with damage. And I had no idea how far she was willing to let it spread. I didn't hear from her for a while after that call. A few days of silence that felt unreal. Like the world was holding its breath. Part of me expected her to show up at my door again, crying, insisting she could fix it. Part of me expected anger. Part of me expected nothing. What I got instead was something quieter. A final message. "I'm sorry it happened like this," she wrote. "I hope you understand I did what I had to do. What I had to do." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Because it confirmed everything without admitting anything. It wasn't an apology. It was a justification. It was her closing the book with her own hand, even after she'd lit the pages on fire. I never responded. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't pull me back into her gravity. In the weeks that followed, I started to feel the emotional shock settle into something dull and heavy. Like bruises you don't notice until the adrenaline wears off. I went back through the entire timeline in my head, searching for the moment I should have known. The moment I should have walked away. The first time she said, "Soon." The first time she said, "It's complicated." The first time she minimized what we were to someone else. I kept thinking about how easy it was for her to live in two realities. How convincing she was inside each one. With me, she was trapped and romantic and desperate for freedom. With him, she was misunderstood and vulnerable and apparently being pursued. Two stories. One person. And both of us were just playing roles in whichever version kept her safest. I'm not pretending I'm blameless. I stepped into something I should have questioned harder. I wanted to believe her because believing her made me feel better about myself. It made me feel like I wasn't doing something cruel. It made me feel like I was part of a love story instead of part of a deception. That's on me. But the part that still sits in my chest like a stone is the intimacy. Not the physical part. The life part. The way she let me into spaces that should have been sacred. Her home. Her child's world. The quiet moments that felt like trust. I think about her husband sometimes. Not in a heroic way. Just in a human way. A person who woke up one day and realized his life had been happening alongside another life he didn't know existed. I think about the way his voice sounded on the phone. Not rage. Just collapse. And then I think about her. How quickly she shifted. How quickly she turned the story so she could survive it. That's what scares me the most in hindsight. Not that she cheated. Not even that she lied. But that she could look at two people who cared about her, two people whose lives she was actively shaping, and decide that the truth was optional. That reality could be edited. That consequences could be managed as long as she stayed in control of the narrative. I used to think love was the most powerful thing in a relationship. Now I think honesty is. Because love without honesty isn't love. It's attachment. It's dependency. It's fantasy. And fantasy is easy to maintain when you're willing to hurt people quietly. I learned something about myself too. How vulnerable I was to being needed. How quickly I mistook intensity for depth. How easily I accepted half answers because the full answers might have forced me to leave sooner. There's a kind of self-betrayal that happens when you stay in something your gut is warning you about. You don't feel it right away. You feel it later, when you're alone, wondering why you ignored yourself. Spring came, eventually. The weather warmed. People went on with their lives. I saw couples holding hands in grocery stores and felt this strange mix of envy and nausea. Not because I wanted what they had exactly, but because I wanted something real. Something that didn't require secrecy to survive. I don't know what happened between them after. I don't know if she stayed. I don't know if he forgave her. I don't know if they rebuilt or burned down completely. And maybe that's the point. People like her don't always face consequences in the way you expect. Sometimes the consequence is just that they move on, reshaping themselves into whatever story comes next. Sometimes the people left behind are the ones who carry the damage. I walked away with no clean ending. No closure. Just the knowledge that I was part of something that never belonged to me, and the uncomfortable truth that I chose to stay longer than I should have. And I've found myself sitting with one question more than any other. If someone can lie while holding two lives in their hands, was it ever love at all? Or were you just the part of the story they could afford to lose?